What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 21 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I talked with KB808, who is a studio owner. He is a record producer and engineer as well. He works on a lot of hip-hop and Afrobeats and things like that. Today we talked about the negative effects of being unprepared for your sessions, what the power of collaboration and building communities looks like, as well as some of his recent experiences with the late Coolio and Pierre Bourne. So stay tuned for all of that and more on this episode of What's That Sound podcast. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of What's That Sound. My name's Stu Watts. Today I'm here with KB808. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Yo. How's it going, everyone? Thanks for having me on, Stewie. Appreciate it,
buddy,
mate.
You are welcome. You are welcome. Now, me and you go back a little bit, but a lot of people might not know who you are. So give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do in the music industry.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, so basically I've been in the recording studio business for about 12 to 15 years or so, just sort of hanging around, working in them, learning in them, and then finally built my own over the last 3 or 4 years, basically. I used to DJ as well, as you know. I have been involved in various different projects with sort of dance music, affiliated people, to drum and bass, to hip-hop, to rock, to, just about most genres that, Melbourne's kind of known for, I guess.
Yeah,
I've been around in those sort of areas, and, at one point I was mixing Latin bands live at Tromba, in Brunswick.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing experience to go through. You were around those days, right?
I was. You
handballed me. Brunswick.
You handballed me one of those gigs. That was good fun.
That's right. Yeah, of course.
Now we'll get into that a little bit more detail, some of the stuff that you've been doing in the past, but we'll take it back even earlier. Where did music come into play for you?
Right. Basically, my first experience with music was my first sort of, realization when I thought I was going to do this for, more than just a hobby or more than just listening to music was, back in the 96, I guess, I think it was 95, 96, when I went to the Michael Jackson concert at the MCG.
I went to that.
You went to that, right?
I was like fucking 10.
yeah, absolutely. I was like 10 and off the boat, and I couldn't speak English. So that was an amazing experience, as you can imagine, right?
Crazy.
But obviously not just seeing Michael Jackson. At the time, you remember Salt and Pepper were warming up? I remember that he did the whole turntablist routine with the, what was it back then? There was a couple of MCs and a couple of guys they worked with. Anyway, it was the first time I've ever seen anything like that live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then kind of experiencing going, right, this guy's making all this from 2 records.
Yeah.
Back then, it was 2 turntables, man, and MC. And seeing 2 female MCs like rip it up on the decks and then jump in front of the stage and start singing and dancing and introducing Michael Jackson. Like, man, that was just like...
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
that was it
crazy.
for me as far as, starting to DJ and look into, the whole production thing was early stages. Don't get me wrong. I didn't start producing in high school, obviously. Back then it was, Ataris and computers were really sort of still new. I was still working out how to, print out, fake sick notes at the time. I wasn't really making music or anything. It was sort of very, very far away at the time. But it was more about working out how to do that with 2 decks and a tape deck. That's how my first production intro started, to be honest.
You're like listening to like what sort of stuff was like floating your boat at that stage?
So at the time, man, it was like Snoop Dogg, Doggy Style, right? That just come out. That whole Dre 2-pack thing was started to brew. Early days, obviously, but like, obviously the Chronic, the original one. A lot of sort of R&B stuff, like Jodeci, a lot of, man, I used to kind of listen to a lot of the American stuff from the time, and it was like, only a few places you could access that stuff as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't played on radio
mainstream
here, right?
Was
it wasn't
definitely
played
not
on
playing
mainstream.
that sort of shit. Yeah.
No, definitely not. So it was just basically going down to Brashes right after Tucker Bag.
Holy shit.
Straight from Tucker Bag to Brushes, and then spend your whole month's pay on $39.95 for a CD, double pack. And then, man, listen to that for 6 years.
Well, that's it.
Like that was my sort of early. I mean, I had a couple of tapes, but I can't say I'm that old. I wasn't starting. Tape decks were kind of phasing out. Obviously, it was a bit old school time. I was sort of on the Sony Discmans. I was, you know.
Yeah, that's it. And then fast forward a little bit, like when did you start kind of becoming aware of production and diving into that a little bit more?
So production came to me a few years after I did about 5 years of mobile DJing. Just sort of, house parties, whatnot. And then sort of trying to, I guess, put that together at home was a little bit, far-fetched, if that makes sense. Like I was trying to make some loops and whatnot from other records. But it was sort of early stages. But when I first sort of stepped foot into the real sort of professional world of production was when I actually did the DJ course at DMC Records up in Prahran. Right, so back in, I think it was probably 99 or 2000, around that time. From memory, I kind of did the course there, which went for 8 weeks. And one of the days from that course was to go to a recording studio and see how you can integrate, your DJing and your production in one sort of realm, right? I think at the time it was a studio, the day trip we went to was a studio in St Kilda, in South Melbourne. I think it was the old MDS DanceNet studios, from memory.
Right.
I mean, again, I was still like 16, 17 at the time. So the whole thing was, it all looked like Warner Brothers studios to me. Walking into like a little DJ room, I was like, what the hell is that? Now thinking back, it was just a console and a mixer.
It just would have looked like a whole massive, Can
you imagine stepping into MDS DanceNet studios at the time, which were like, decent studios with a lot of equipment. I kind of got to have a little, I guess a 1 day quick crash course on how I can go grab a record, sample that into a sampler, pull it up on the computer, sequence it, add sounds. And like at the time I was just like, I kind of knew this was possible. Honestly, but I didn't see it. I didn't, there was no internet research. There wasn't like, there was magazines. There was PC magazine. There was like audio magazine stuff, but like it was more related to, ridiculous pro consoles and live setups. And
exactly.
There wasn't the plug-in talk, live bands, right? You understand. A lot of the studios around that time that we were around, we grew up in, they were kind of more focused on live traditional production, where they have a drummer come in and play drum part. Like they won't have a session on how to make a drum loop yourself. You had to work that out.
And it was just like, I mean, in Australia, it was just Australian music hadn't progressed to, apart from like underground dance music, there wasn't really any hip hop and like even dance music. There was none of that on the radio. It was like pop music, which was like electronic, but it didn't kind of have, it just didn't have the sway that live music and guitar rock and stuff had over the 100%. Mainstream radios.
100%. Yeah. Even when I started working at DMC Records, which was my next sort of venture into the actual DJ production world in a professional level, I kind of experienced like, the early days of that technology starting to surface. As far as, what was the early sort of tools like, the very first...
like old school Fruity Loops and stuff as well.
Right, Rebirth. Things like that. Remember Rebirth? 808 stacks, right? And then Reason came out. Before Logic had any of that bells and whistles of plugins and synths and samplers still, like we had Logic 4 and 5 back in those days, but to make a sample or a drum loop in Logic back then, it was a, 3-day adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
Then Reason came out, and then there was a couple other tools. There was FL, Fruity Loops at the time was called. which is now FL Studio, which is one of the biggest doors in the world.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it was just a drum sequencer, as you know yourself.
Yeah.
So kind of seeing all that happen on the early production days, it was kind of a real eye-opener, to go, okay, I sort of saw how it used to be done just with 2 turntables and a sampler with 3 seconds of sample time,
Yeah.
And I saw guys, man, in that studio, the first couple of years at DMC, obviously I was hanging around, kind of trying to learn and, making sort of most of the time that I was there. The DJ course would be on downstairs. I'd be upstairs in the studio. Like, where's KB? Kind of thing.
Yeah,
I kind of forgot about the DJ course. You know what I mean? I was just like, okay, so this is what's going on. I'll just spend my time up here. I'll just keep paying for the DJ course, but it's all good.
Yeah, that's it.
So kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because it's like then obviously the sampling and stuff, even the early versions of it that you were seeing still obviously stuck in your mind because, and we'll get to it, but that's essentially how you're producing these days, right? You're using your MPC and all that sort of thing that still plays into how you do it. So it's fascinating that has stuck with you and it imprinted on you that was like the way to make the sort of music that you were into.
Absolutely, man. I kind of always made music with a DJ mindset and more on feeling than going, you know what, I wish I could pick up a guitar and play it and a bass. But now I can just dial up a bass in any key on Splice with 1,000 different versions. Yeah. For me to do that 10 years ago, it's like impossible. Yeah. I had like 2 CDs worth of sample CDs. Nowadays, as you know, man, like it's kind of ridiculous. Like I'm still doing the same thing, but I've got an entire world of resources now. I can collaborate with a musician somewhere in Sweden that I've never met for $10.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Like,
it's crazy.
Ridiculous,
so talk to us about
like, you have now.
Yeah, well, exactly. Talk to us a little bit about moving into like when you actually started to do it, like what was that like? So you even starting to work on your own music and producing your own music, creating your own music and collaborating with others even. I'm guessing it was quite a lot different back then. And what did it look like?
Oh, it definitely was. It definitely was. So at DMC, I started working with an old friend of mine, Gab Oliver. So at the time he was making deep house. So the real underground, real sort of experimental sound that, would only be played in a few handful of clubs in Melbourne, but was big in London at the time and in Europe. The Sashes, the Digweeds at the time were playing all this stuff at festivals. And so for us to kind of start making that stuff, like we were on the original Mac G3s. That's why my first experience was on a proper big boy computer. And at the time we were running Logic 4. Logic 4 or 5, early version of Logic, reason to make loops and patterns, sequencing, and like we would literally be looking for samples on movies and on TV shows, on records, obviously, on it was 90% research for an idea and a concept, and then 3 weeks to sequence it and make it sound good, because you have all this technology around in your computer, but it wasn't as powerful as it is today.
It was a lot slower. Computers weren't able to do anything of what they can fucking do today. It's like,
you can imagine,
just
right? Like
drag it in and hit play and it's already there. But it's so different.
We experienced the early days of time correction, man. We had to time correct loops manually, Stu. So what that means is, I don't think a lot of the guys that I work with today, the younger kids, have experienced that, because even today, like, you kind of can just chop it up and move it without even knowing that you're doing anything special. You know what I mean?
It's not something that you need to know. Yeah.
You don't need to know what you're doing. And time correction has become this, automatic. But how we started in Logic, none of that existed. So if we found a sample, let's say at 145 BPM, and we're working at 128 BPM, the dreadful moment was like, this is hot. Who's going to pick the small straw and time correct this for 3 days? To see if it works, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously we'd have, and then we no, this is shit, delete it. So, don't get me wrong, we had workarounds. We used to cheat. We used to like record CDRs and put them into the CD player and slow the pitch down.
And I think
to obviously do things like that.
by knowing what you're doing and practicing and getting used to the technology and how you actually do it, you can kind of foresee when something's not going to work a bit easier anyway as well.
Absolutely. You pick up a process, you become better at it, regardless of how difficult it was. It was a lot of work, but we did a lot more tracks than now. So, it's kind of, the catalog was bigger. Like, we're doing it full time as well. So that's the other thing. I got to experience it from a unique perspective because not a lot of people did do it full time at the time. And because I was working in a record store below a studio, we had the freedom of DMC Records allowing us to treat that place as our own. Thanks to people like Stuart, Gab, Phil K, Gab Oliver, Stuart Hanna, the guys that ran the place. We kind of became a family, obviously. And so we kind of got to live it, man. We got to live that lifestyle and sort of have the luxury of being able to try this stuff that we were making at the time at a club, where Gab was DJing or Phil or any of the guys that I was working with on a massive sound system where when clubs had good sound systems, back in 2005.
Yeah.
In 01, from then, like, there was some crazy sound systems, man. And like, people really paid attention to how your thing sounded in a club or a concert.
Yeah.
Not just on your headphones or your phone. Like, that was ridiculous, regardless to the point where, how it sounded at home.
Well, I mean, everything sounds good now. Like, everything, even the smaller speakers.
Everything sounds good the same everywhere.
Yeah. There's no like translation issues aren't really as much of a problem.
No. Well,
let's
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, let's move forward to kind of what the you of today is now and what your process looks like now and some of the people that you work with and that sort of thing.
Absolutely, man. So as of today, like last few years, I've obviously been running Cosmic Bounce here. So I built the studio in 2019, 2020, we completed it. So we've been sort of working with different crews and different artists from Melbourne and just sort of helping people develop the sound, man. I'm kind of, currently a one-man show. So I'm trying to, organize different, schedules for different artists and recording schedules, client schedules, and, artwork and all sorts of stuff. So there's kind of a bit of a 24/7 approach at the moment. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, no, I think you're doing it quite differently to most other producers. Excuse me. And that's probably just because of your experience and how long you've been doing it. You've been seeing how to do things the right way and how to do things the wrong way. And so,
I think so.
I think what you understand is, that it takes a holistic approach to music. It's not just about the music. And this is something we talk about here heaps on this podcast is like, without the other 80% of the stuff that you have to do as a musician, the music, which is about 10 or 20%, doesn't actually matter.
Absolutely, man. It's a very, very big part of basically making good music. And a lot of these guys struggle with that, unfortunately. And everyone that I work with, I know I went through the same thing. Unfortunately, it's not topic at the top of the discussion list at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's really important to keep that in mind, obviously, because a lot of musicians work jobs that go for 150 hours a week sometimes, and still try and become creative and try and be in a good mood to be able to release the creative energy and be in a good place and not have all these stresses in the back of your mind. A lot of these people I work with are parents, and they're also working two jobs. They're trying to juggle a lot of things, man, and they're trying to become, something that takes a lot of time and energy and funds,
Yeah.
So it's really a lot of pressure, man, for musicians today, as you know yourself, to be able to go. It's no longer just working out how to rap or sing, man. They have to know how to become a videographer, a photographer, an Instagram expert, and a full-time, parent at the same time.
It's ridiculous. So let's dive more into kind of what your actual sessions look like and your approach to recording with artists. You record with a whole bunch of different artists. Let's name some. We've got Adrian Swish you've worked with, O Smoove, Matthew Craig, JDro, Jess Makaveli. These are some really kind of I don't even know the word for it, but I think Melbourne especially has such a cool hip hop scene at the moment. And everyone's kind of got each other's backs in a way as well. And I mean, that's kind of a bit of a side note, but, you know, I think it's important to mention how much it won't be underground eventually. And these are the sorts of artists and, you know, producers like yourself that are going to make the difference in the years to come. So talk us through some of those artists and, you know, your approach to working with them.
Absolutely, man. So this is the process usually is how I work with the artists that I kind of produce for is, we do the old school hang out jam session. I play them some beats, you know, and then we kind of vibe, man, like straight out. This is how most of these sessions start. And most of these guys that you've just named, man, they're very, very talented people that can write a fucking track in 15 minutes, dude. You know what I mean? So I've been very lucky as well to go, I've been able to go, I can fire off beats to people, and then it gives them that look on their face that, you know that something's coming out, you know. It's like, usually it starts with a beat, to be honest with you, man. And like from there, if the guys are inspired, it's like 2 hours later, we're, you know, doing ad-libs, literally. Yeah. You know, and like sometimes it doesn't happen that quick, don't get me wrong. You know, with all of us, it's kind of one of those things, man. When you're in the right space, you're in the right frame of mind, magic happens, you know, because sometimes I'd be working, let's say, with O Smoove, you know, and then 2 hours later, JDro would rock up. And then all of a sudden he's hearing what we're doing, and then they start cooking up, they start writing. Next thing you know, we've got a hook, we've got a verse. You know, Swish would rock up an hour later. All of a sudden he's got 15 harmonies on it, you know.
Yeah, dude.
You know, it's like all of a sudden, man, it's gone in a different direction. And then we've gone to, you know, from an R&B thing to a trap thing to, you know, all these guys' influences sort of in the room. It's kind of been amazing to see it happen, to kind of go, let them just sort of be what they are, and let them sort of, you know, use their strengths on each sort of session, you know, and then kind of, you know, it's really interesting to see how it sort of, you know, unfolds, because everyone's just got their own little thing that they do really, really well, you know, and it's just kind of being in the moment and being present in the studio sessions when these moments come up, and people that take advantage of it, you know, it's sort of kicked some goals for them, man, the last couple of years, you know. And
100%. I think like being at Marshall Street Studios as well, I have a similar, you know, experience with some of the dudes that are producing out of here as well. You know, they do things the same way. It's a lot of like community based thing where it's like anyone can get on the mic and start spitting and just lay down some tracks, and it is really, really cool to see. And it's just like, and it always works out. It's like you might see a new face and they might never have been here, and they might never have been in a recording session or something like that before. And, you know, it's just something to experience if someone is interested in rapping or, you know, even producing and getting on the computer. It's like, yeah, go, just take a seat and just do it. And it's fucking cool to see.
Absolutely, man. And this is the thing about collaboration in music, you know, you can't have one without the other almost, you know. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you can't make music on your own. What I'm saying is that when people collaborate and they're open-minded about the collaboration, things can change dramatically, you know. And people that are kind of, I guess, do that often, you just become better at it. You'd learn how to communicate with people, and you kind of, you can open up to new experiences, I guess. We've had many sessions here where people show up, friends of friends, or the next session would show up early. They'd be hanging out in the back couch talking. Before you know it, the guy's jumping on this track from the other guy. So it's just like, you know, it creates a, music opens up a channel. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. And like, you can kind of become friends with someone that you don't know, and then all of a sudden you're writing a track together within 15 minutes. You know? Yeah. It's a really unique thing that it can do to people. Absolutely. Especially when they're meeting up in these spaces.
100%. It's an unspoken thing. It's a vibration that music like hits us on, you know, and you don't even have to necessarily understand the genre or anything like that. It's an unspoken thing that you can just feel the energy and respond to it in a different way that you might not have before. That's sick, man. Well, what are some of the difficulties that you see then in sessions? Like any kind of things that you notice that regularly happen?
I think the most problem I see is people come unprepared to sessions, right? To be honest with you. I understand, look, there's other things that come up in life and whatnot. A lot of people sort of, I guess, can have a little bit of foresight on what they're about to do on that day, and just sort of mentally prepare for the recording, for the day. Because what happens then is that you're opening up channels for better things to happen in the session, right? Because if you come in and you're still looking for your lyrics and you haven't downloaded your beat yet, what happens is, you know, instead of gaining 30 minutes with the engineer helping you to make your rap better, automatically you've lost 30 minutes of positive energy time, right? Because you're going to be frustrated. The download site might be slow that day. You know what I mean?
The website might not be working. The fucking YouTube to wave bloody website that we've got to use.
I could get another virus on my studio computer because someone hasn't bought their own beat. You know what I mean? And little things like that are going to push your session into the wrong direction because you haven't prepared for it, right? And it's very, very important because, you know, I've seen sessions that do and I've seen sessions that don't, obviously, and a million times over in the last 5 years. And it really is a big difference, man. It really is a big, massive difference. People need to just understand that you're the only one that can make this happen.
Yeah, that's so true.
For yourself. But really, man, it's like, you know, I can provide $1 million worth of equipment, microphone, studio time, you know, whatever you need. But if people show up to music sessions or recording sessions or any creative sort of session with the wrong attitude and especially unprepared and late, you know, it's kind of, it's
the knock-on effect. It's like a snowball of just things that are going to go wrong. You know, it's like you're not allowing all of the possibilities of things to go right to happen. You're instantly, by rocking up late or being unprepared, it's instantly you're on the back foot.
You're instantly on the back foot. And, you know, unfortunately with the creative process, that's a instant negative as well because everyone's energy in the room is going to kind of get pretty low. As soon as you come in late, you hold the engineer up, the next session is going to be late, the one after that's going to be also delayed. And you also, all of a sudden, you've got 5 people in the room that are kind of not happy now. You know, indirectly, I'm not saying people do this directly, but you kind of going to push that session in a different direction, where the opposite is kind of going to be very beneficial for the entire process and the people around you, you know?
And you're just showing the respect to each of the people in that room, whether it's the engineer or not. It's like you're showing respect to your peers by being on time and being prepared. You're showing respect for the actual craft as well, which it requires that. It's not something that you can just whip up any time. It's not, I mean, some people are extremely talented and can just, you know, knock out something, but even those people are going to struggle from day to day. But like you said, the more you're prepared, the more respect you show to the craft and the whole process. And it just allows for a much more like smoother outcome for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely, mate. You have to respect what you do.
Yeah. Let's talk through some of, you know, your production styles and things like that. You know, it's a lot of hip hop based stuff. You know, you do some Afro, you do, you know,
absolutely,
R&B sorts of things. And the things that I've noticed is like your sounds are extremely clean and extremely upfront and modern, but, you know, they have, you know, some 90s influences and things like that. But there's always some sort of ambience that I found listening to your tracks. There's always some sort of like kind of feeling to them that is like flowy and, you know, I don't know. That's just kind of what I gathered from checking out your tunes.
No, absolutely. No, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, you know, my process is kind of, how do I explain it? It's I don't want to just say I go on feeling. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of, I'm sure you've heard that before, but I guess, it's kind of because I can make a trap track on a one day and then the next day we can work on a Spanish track with Danny on a reggaeton thing or a completely different vibe. It's kind of more of a creative energy that I'm working off. I feed it off the artists that I'm working with, obviously at the time, they influence me a lot and on how the music comes about, One day I could be starting a track just from hearing a sample on my phone when I'm still at the gym. I haven't even got to the studio yet. And that's the whole track, It's more about finding concepts now. You know what I mean? Like, man.
So how do you get into that kind of space then? Like what allows you to get into that zone of being able to do that?
Basically, man, I think it's been the fact that I've been repeating this process for the last 2 years full time, right? And just the repetition and the consistency and just trying to basically put down a plan for each project. So let's say I'm working with one artist, we'll put down a plan to finish these 10 tracks, and that'll be the deal that I make with the artist that I'm working with to go, okay, we have to complete this from here on. I'll give you X and X, you give me X and X. And within 3 to 4 months, for example, we would have, 2 albums finished, 2 singles, whatever that is. So once we start that process, I'm trying to inspire the artist to keep the consistent coming back to work on the next track, finish this one and keep going, to keep the repetition going, because that's the only way I've found to be able to, move your sound to the next level, basically. Right? It's even on an independent level, man. Like,
it's a good point. And, the consistency is a huge thing. It's like you can't know what you don't know and what you do know without doing it a whole lot of times. It's the 10,000 hours thing. It's like you need to be able to trial and error things so many times to get to the point where you don't need to anymore and you just know what works.
100%, man. You have to be willing to put in the time, right? You have to be able to go, I'm going to give up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours for this stuff. Like, there's only a few people that I know that are willing to stay in a studio on a Saturday night and look for kick drums. You know what I mean, man? Like, I did that for a long time, and once you do that, you build up a library of sounds that you have your go-to things, and having that power, man, I think is really, really important because, again, I'm not making music traditionally by any which way. You know what I mean? Like it's a process that is taken from people like Dr. Dre, people like who's one of my biggest influences, obviously. Who never played any instruments, but he had a lot of talented people around him and he utilized them properly. And that's what I'm kind of doing now. Finishing a track is one thing. Finishing the beat is one thing today, Stewie. The way we're doing it now, it's like there's so many other bits of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
For it to happen, you need the tracking, you need the recording, you need the mixing, you need the mastering. And then when that's done, you need to actually go out there and promote it with the artist. So he needs to find shows and X and X and book gigs and, so it's kind of,
there's heaps to it.
The steps are very involved, very involved.
Man.
And that just comes from consistency, man. That's the only way you can sort of go, I want to sort of do this. How do I do it?
Yeah.
In my position and my view is to kind of just do it. And if you're really passionate about it, 10 years ago, if you told me I'd be sitting here doing this, making a album in Spanish with Danny Padron, in the same year that I did a track with Coolio and sending beats over to Timberland for sync opportunities and NBA and NHL and all sorts of stuff, they'll tell you you're crazy. But that all happened within 12 months, so... straight after the pandemic. So it's kind of, a weird thing to say, but I just sort of give it to the fact that I've literally spent, every single minute that I could in this place since I built it, because I literally set my mind on that I'm doing this. That's how you win, I think, man. Everyone I've looked at and listened to in my entire life who's been a mentor or a person that I've taken advice from, has kind of, told me to sort of keep up this sort of process. And, whether it works for me or someone else it may not work for, but as far as getting into a studio and just making a track, I can kind of do that now, I guess, in 15 minutes. But because I've been doing it 15, 20 years, though.
Yeah, that's it.
We can go straight to the point of a particular artist that I'm working with, because I've got a vast library of sounds that I've been collecting for over 20 years almost.
100%. 100%.
There's some files on here that I've got, Stewie, on my current computer that if you look back on the date created, it's literally 2001, February something.
Yeah.
Like I've just moved them from hard drive to hard drive to hard drive. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
it. Yeah.
So it's like I still meet dudes that I help producers, young guys that come in for advice and tips and whatnot.
Yeah.
They don't have any, they don't even have anything saved in their presets, let alone have a library of sounds.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. Let's get into kind of the process that you take when you're, creating beats, not only creating beats, the finalization process of finalizing your tracks. Like, what does that look like? Is it the same kind of thing every time? Do you have the same sort of processing, those sorts of things? Talk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So what I've got basically is I've set up my own templates in Pro Tools for mixing, mastering, tracking, things like that, obviously, because I do it on a daily basis here, so you can't start a session from scratch every single time, obviously. And I've developed these templates over the last few years, obviously, where I've got my go-to things where, to make the process, streamline the process, basically, you have to create templates. Very important, as you know, right? Mm-hmm. I've got, obviously, a lot of my go-to stuff, which I'm using a lot of the Slate Digital package at the moment. I record with the Slate Digital mic. So that kind of works with my whole vocal chain. So once I've mixed it, then I would sort of split out a final mix and then go into a new session in Pro Tools and then just do a bit of hardware processing, which I've only got like a couple of SSL boxes that I just sort of run that through for a bit of color. Yeah. A bit of sort of, hardware juice, as they call it, and, kind of spit it back into the box, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
what are you looking for, like, when you're actually like mixing and finalizing a track? Like, how do you know when it's finished? How do you know like what a good mix sounds like?
Basically, man, you kind of know what a good mix sounds like because of all the references we've been listening to our whole lives, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? Like, I've got a few of my go-to WAVs, that Dre instrumentals that I've got on the computer. That are like, I kind of know it's the gold standard for my sort of sound. It depends on who you like, man, who you follow, and who inspires you to make music is very important. What you sound like, for me,
point,
you know what I mean? Like, I've always been trying to, in a lot of ways, copy someone that I've always loved and idolized my whole life, and they've always spoken about music and taught things in a certain way. So I think it's really important to find that sound from that avenue, because it's kind of
it's a good point. It's like we all learn from the people that have come before us, and they've learnt from the people that have come before them, and everyone kind of gathers things along the way. And we pick up little things here and there from different people. We might like some things, we might not like some of the things they do, so we kind of just keep that always in our subconscious as we're working, and we just you're right. It is an unspoken thing or an unspeakable thing where you just don't know necessarily when it's done. It's just done. It's just when you just don't notice anything anymore.
That's when I know it's done when everyone in the room that I'm working with is happy with it, and they're looking at me and going, "Yep," and we're all vibing with it. I think it's also really important to understand that it has to come to a point where you think it's done too. Because a lot of people can procrastinate when it comes to finishing music, as we know, and like you have to streamline your process enough to get it to sound good enough to go, I know this is done now if we get it to sound how I think it sounds good. Like,
facts.
if you can't make that decision, it's difficult, man. It's difficult to finish music because, especially with a lot of guys working in home studios, because if you can't hear it the way your ear wants to hear it, you can never get to that end point. A lot of them try and do it all at home and the whole process, but unfortunately, it kind of makes them take a lot longer in the end because they can't get to that finish point because they can't hear that sweet spot, where it's got to sit, with the vocals, with the mixing, with the mastering, and they're trying to mimic records that they're hearing on the radio that have had hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on them, as you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they've been produced and mixed and stuff in amazing studios with great speakers and all this and that. It's like, I think the point is as well, you don't need all that sort of stuff these days, but you do need a reliable system, whether that's a really great set of headphones or a well-treated room with a decent set of monitors. You're just not going to be able to compete sonically with the other stuff if you don't have anything below 80 hertz coming out of your speakers. It's not possible.
This is the thing. Absolutely right. And this is the thing, there's a lot of misconception out there with technology that they sell people these new pieces of gear that, sell a different message. Like a lot of monitors out there are not actually monitors. Like, you know what I mean? In the essential meaning of the word. You know what I mean? The listening environment's crucial. A lot of people have missed that in these days. And, that's fair enough. You don't need that for the majority of the process, don't get me wrong. But it's still crucial, in my opinion, that it's not forgotten because what happens is the quality is degrading in that on an overall sense when people skip a few of those steps in the end. Yeah. For funding reasons, for whatever reason, but it's just going to hold a lot of reach back because as you know, to get backing from industry, to get backing from overseas artists, especially who spend all their time and effort and money to make their stuff sound amazing, they're not going to give anyone a go from overseas, especially that has put very little effort into the sonics of a sound recording.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've had
what's
people
standing
like
out
Pierre
to
Bourne in
me?
the studio.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I've had guys like Pierre Bourne in the studio recently, who's like a top-notch US guy, and he's killing it at the moment, and doing beats for everybody, man. It's just like their process and their hustle and their drive, and the way they kind of take time in the detail of their productions and vocals, and just what I saw. And even though I only did one session, which was a 6-hour session, it was just amazing to see that the effort and the level of detail is rewarded at the big game, man. It's we kind of forget that sometimes here in Australia, I think. And we kind of tend to go, oh, it's all right, this will do or this will do. Dude, I literally saw this guy cut up one beat for 4 hours. And then he goes, no, just delete it. Don't worry about it. Let's go to the next one. But like,
shit,
you got to give it the time it needs, man.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. The fact that you said that the effort is rewarded. And I think what you said about Australia, and I think Australia, it comes from the personality of Australians in general. It's obviously we're a lot more laid back in general, and we kind of have the tall poppy thing going on as well that I'm sure a lot of people from overseas can potentially relate to as well. But I think it's super prevalent here, and you kind of get cut down for being someone that stands out and takes time and wants to be someone that is special. It's kind of like almost frowned upon, but in an artistic world, which is what we're in, you have to be someone that stands out. You're just never going to compete with the best of the best if you cannot be taking the time to be the best of the best. It's simple as that.
You have to put your best foot forward, man. I tell a lot of these younger guys, just imagine you're going out and you got a hotel room on your first date. You're going to put in a lot of effort on how you look, how you smell. You know what I mean? You're not going to go to Kmart to buy your clothes. Right? You're going to go to the Gucci store, man. Right? You're going to go to the Gucci store. You're going to put your best foot forward. And if you did that with your music, and if you did that with everything else in life, man.
Yeah, man.
Things happen, dude. Things happen.
And I think the correlation between money and and effort is somewhat like a parallel there, but it's not. Yeah, it's funny, man. I can't put it into words, but it's like the amount of money spent to look good should be equal to the amount of time and effort in music or any sort of artistic, whether you're a videographer, whatever it is, even if you're a manager of an artist, it's like the time and effort that you put in directly correlates to what you get back.
100%, man, 100%.
Yeah,
and look, I think we kind of forget that sometimes in this country a little bit, just because simply of the fact that I think our scene here as well is a little bit young. It's a little bit new.
It is, yeah.
Compared to the rest of the world, right? So it's not like, we've got some amazing talent here. Don't get me wrong at all, right? But the thing is that it's a very young scene. A lot of people find it hard to, like you just said, stand out and not be criticized for that sometimes too, because, you want to be able to put your best foot forward, but also that doesn't help when you don't have a lot of support, for younger guys, especially financial support, industry support, even nightclubs putting on local artists as headliners. Little things like that doesn't quite happen in this country yet, where we don't have enough crowds following these little scenes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, some of these guys in America that can sell out small shows for 5,000 people in the local neighborhood. For us, that's a headline artist.
It's a dream. It's a fucking dream. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? And for that to become a local scene in Australia and to give all these young guys an opportunity to make a few bucks off this scene and sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think it's really important that, that people kind of not undervalue what we do.
Yeah, I think we're definitely on the right track. But like you say, we're early on, but we are starting to see the communities build up and really – there was a period of, say, like 10, 15 years, I reckon, where the internet influenced so much and because it was new and people were seeing success on the early days of SoundCloud or the early days of MySpace or something like that even. These were platforms that were blowing people up, so people got access to it and they saw how easy sometimes it could have been. But that led to less of a community and things like COVID and stuff didn't help as well. But I think we are starting to see where communities are starting to build and everyone's supporting each other. And even like, it's funny, even like in scenes that aren't hip hop and underground and stuff like that, even like local, like indie rock and stuff like that, it's the same thing absolutely applies. It's like, if you don't have a community, if you don't have a group of people that can support each other and build each other up and not tear each other down, not go, fuck, why did they get that gig instead of me? And that is just the wrong culture. It doesn't build this community that we're talking about that they have in places like America and the UK and other places like that.
That's exactly what I was talking about, basically. And I think, the funny thing is with the lockdowns, I think it made people aware how important it is to be part of a community. Because if you're not, you were stuck alone. But if you were, everyone, had their own little spaces they went to. They were kicking it. They were making music. Yep. Some legal, some illegal. Let's not name any names. But we were made aware that community and support from our peers is really important. Especially because like you weren't able to go 5Ks from your neighborhood for a little while. And that even made more of a point that it's really important to know people from your local area and have connections in clubs and bars and know who the local business is that can benefit from what you do, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think another point to if you do see these sorts of things pop up where you might see like a new nightclub or a new thing that they're trying to do or a new record store or something like that, these are the things that we really need to support and show up at, because those are the things that build exactly what we're talking about.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And that's how you create a culture, from inside another culture. So, people sort of like-minded artists do this everywhere. You know what I mean? And like all around the world for thousands of years,
Exactly.
It's like, we didn't start anything, man. You know what I mean? We're just rinsing and repeating a process that has made music and film and, every other sort of artistic path possible.
Yeah, yeah.
People didn't commute, you know, it wouldn't be possible at all.
Yeah, man. And this chat has kind of gone in a completely different direction to where a lot of our chats usually go. But I'm really loving it. I'm fascinated about all this stuff, and like I love it. And you know, being in the place like Marshall Street, and you know, you doing exactly what you do is exactly why we are talking so much about this. But it's so important. But talk to me more about like we'll start to wrap it up. Talk to me about, you know, some of your favorite times that you've seen occur in sessions, whether that's, you know, specific songs that you've worked on or anything like that, and then we'll get into some other stuff. But yeah, start with me there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, we've had some interesting times in 2022, obviously, just post-lockdown. So early in the year, I sort of I was put in touch with Coolio through a friend of mine, videographer Scorp. So that was an interesting sort of couple of months. He was here on his tour last January, February, and yeah, we ended up catching up. And you know, next thing you know, we're here doing barbecues and you know, playing beats, and everyone from the community and the groups were popping in at different times, you know, jumping on different tracks and having different stories, and you know, all sorts of like. I just got to see what I originally built this place for come to fruition, with like having an international artist here and like putting out, you know, put the word out to a couple of the guys, JDro, Smoove, Jess, obviously, you know, Cardio, and you know, the guys that I work with, and from that it stemmed into like a week of, you know, a barbecue every day basically here, and people shooting hoops, and like, you know, I just sort of saw what this could become on a much larger scale with 10 studios like this around Brunswick and Melbourne. You know what I mean? And I just saw like, no, this is possible. The people do want to do this. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like there isn't enough people doing it, or that the scene doesn't exist. Man, it's alive and kicking. It just needs the support and the finance. But that was, you know, an interesting couple of months for the studio, because I worked with a US artist for the first time in my life directly in the studio. Like I've had placements and whatnot in the past with, you know, semi-known artists and whatnot, but never in here working with them, you know, in a personal one-on-one situation, and, you know, got to see how someone like Coolio's experience works in the studio and records vocals and, you know, and how he approaches harmonies and ad-libs, and, you know, and it was just an amazing experience for me to have someone in here that I've been listening to my whole life, basically, you know.
For sure.
Who had some amazing stories, man.
Yeah, for sure. I heard through, you know, secondhand some of the stories and stuff. It's crazy. But like, expand on that. Tell us about like the process of like what made him different to other people.
So initially what made him different was that he would sort of write a bunch of ideas, record them, just a bunch of random ideas because obviously we would start again how I start most of my sessions with playing people beats that I've already got cooked up, that to see if they can get inspired, you know. And then from then it's like, okay, you know, you can get a feel for what the artist wants to do. Coolio just happened to pick like the second or third thing that I played, and I got to sort of see it from like a, you know, I guess at a pro level. Someone that has been, you know, in studios with obviously Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, Warren G, Tupac.
Yeah,
you know, man, he's been in with everybody, dude. You know, as you can imagine, right? And I'm just sitting here like I just didn't know what to take in at once, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is my entire childhood in one sort of sitting, you know. And this guy was hanging out with him, you know. So it was just, man, like he was just work ethic, like, dude. Honestly, like nothing like I've ever seen. Yeah. He would literally work himself to the bone, where he'd be passed out on the couch from writing, like just, you know, out cold for 8 hours. And we did that for about 2 weeks.
It's
you know,
crazy.
and just, man, relentless writing and rewriting and trying takes and then redoing it. And
well,
like,
I think you know what,
not being precious,
what it kind of says to me, yeah, for sure. What it says to me is like he recognizes, and like all professionals do, they recognize that is their job. You know, it's like I'm not here for any other reason than to work. So it's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to gain by just hanging out for a couple hours? And, you know, you might build relationships, which is also important. But when you're there to work, it's like, do your job. And that was his job at, you know, for being there. It's absolutely. Like same for you. You were sitting on the computer, you were sitting on the MPC for 8 hours a day, doing your job. And it's like that is, if you're looking at this and you're hearing this and you're not there yet, recognize that's what's needed to become a professional.
Absolutely, man. Someone at Coolio's level with 30 years experience who had a Grammy at 18, right? Still sat here, and as soon as the barbecue finished, he walked in with his plate and kept driving.
Yeah.
Everyone was outside drinking, talking shit, whatever. We had heaps of people here that wanted to meet him, photos, gifts. He was clothing was thrown at him, all sorts of club appearances. Can you come to our club? Blah, blah, blah. Dude, he wants to stay here.
Yeah.
For the whole 2 weeks. He didn't want to go. He's like, he went to a couple of places and he made it onto project. But like, he'd bring me up in the morning. KB, what's going on? You at the lab? I'm coming now. I'm not in today, man. I got to go to doctors. I'll see you soon. Dude,
that's hustle,
awesome, man. And you can tell that someone at his age who was 58, man, when I worked with him, right, was 58, he still had that fire, man. He still had that fire when he was in the studio, and the creative energy, it never dies. Like, if that's your thing and you've been doing it and living it your whole life, and I'm, you know, someone that's spent 30 years singing Gangsta's Paradise live and still wanting to do it.
Yeah,
like,
dude.
Man, I was just like amazed, dude, amazed. And how, like, you know, you can really live a great lifestyle doing what you love, and you don't have to become Justin Bieber, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in the music scene, honestly, like, you know.
Yeah, dude, for sure. I mean, especially now with the access to, you know, getting your music out there, and if you play your cards right and be smart about it and work hard, like we've been talking about this whole fucking podcast, if you do the right thing and take all the time, it's like you can, like you said, and it is a life that is possible. If you're not there yet, you can be there. Let's start to wrap it up. What is your final, I mean, we've gone through so many bits of advice, but what do you have any like final bits of advice for, first of all, producers and engineers, and then secondly, artists?
Yeah, absolutely. For young, inspiring producers, I would always have to say, just keep up the consistency. You know, one thing I noticed these days is lacking is just consistent hustle on your craft. You know, I work with some fucking super amazing, talented people, man. And if they applied themselves a little bit more, and I'm not saying quit your job, leave your missus, you know what I mean? I'm not saying like become a studio lab rat, you know, all the time. That's ideal, but you know, that's not for everybody, man. But you can have a balance where you can be 50 hours a week of production, 10 hours of this, health and fitness, family, right? All these things, man. If I didn't go to the gym every day, I could not make these beats. You know why? Because after 2 hours, my back would be killing me, dude. There'll be other issues that come up, health issues. You got to be aware of these things, man. It's not just finding mad samples, getting a singer in here, opening a studio, and then let's go.
Yeah.
It's one thing, man, but you know, that's one great thing. I can have O Smoove here one day. He's an amazing rapper, as you know, right?
Yeah.
But if he is having a bad day that day, shit's not going to come out. And we've had those days, you know what I mean? Yeah, not many with Smoove, but we've had them, right? And everyone, it's just the consistency, man, and knowing that before I can make this beat, the last three things that are bothering me and have to be solved is an important part of making that beat. That's all.
Yeah. And I think like what stands out to me there is like preparation and knowing how to get yourself right and knowing what you need to do to consistently produce like the goods is like, yeah, like you said, it's those unspoken things, whether it's gym, whether it's eating healthy, whether it's sleep, all of those things.
Lifestyle's important.
You just can't perform at your best and you can't be your best. You know, you might want to only sing, or you might want to only produce for your whole life. And it's like, that's good, but you won't be able to without the holistic approach of being healthy and doing the things that you need to do, whatever that is, meditation, anything, whatever you need to do to get yourself right and ready for the day, you got to do it.
Very important. And second bit of advice for producers is learn how to use social media. And learn how to use it to your advantage as well. Don't get over-consumed in it, because it's going to be very, very overwhelming, and there's a lot of clickbait out there. But, you know, I see a lot of guys using it incorrectly and making it a real nightmare for themselves, where it becomes a burden, and you almost don't want to do it anymore, because doing things right and wrong, you know, it can really lead you on a different path. So there's a lot of tools out there, but, you know, it's really important to utilize them in a way where you're not wasting time and mucking around. And, like, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions from people that are already doing it. Research people that are doing it, follow them, mimic them, and try and become part of what they do, man. Like, I'm amazed at how many producers are too scared to hit me up for a free mix assessment session. Like, or just call me, man. Send me a message on Instagram. Like,
yeah,
you know, you get all the usual stuff, fire, love hearts, all the, you know, support stuff. But, like, sometimes it takes months for someone to ask, oh, man, I'm a producer. I'd love for you to mix my stuff. I've been hanging around for months, this and that. I know this guy. Like, why don't you just text me, man? Like, you know, like, this is what I'm here to do. Like, you may not have the funds at the moment. You might think it's too out of reach. You might not think you can record here or whatever. Regardless of the point, every business opens up their doors to a client initially for free, right?
Yeah.
As
and
a networking thing. And you have to be able to do your research, man. And that's what that takes. Like,
and
at 16, I went to
I was just going to say, you've set these kind of things up in your head. I can't afford it. I can't do this. I can't do that, without even having talked to the person and explaining your situation to them and what you need in the first place.
Absolutely, man. And most of the time, I can provide recording, mixing, and mastering less than a price of Jordan 3s. You know what I mean? It's not that expensive, but when people realize that, you know, it's like, okay, this is, you know what I mean? This is doable. It's not that out of reach. You know what I mean? It's only a extra couple of steps, but it brings you a lot of value long term, basically.
Yep. Nice one, man. Well, this has been fucking awesome. I appreciate your time, man.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. Good luck with the podcast and everything down at Marshall Street. Hopefully, we'll get down there real soon again.
Absolutely.
My next day off, I think, is in September, so I'll let you know.
Yeah, man, I'm about the same, hey.
Have another party down there, will you? Otherwise, I can't get down there.
Facts, yeah. Where can people find you, dude?
Instagram, obviously, at KB808 Music. I'm not trending on Twitter anymore since Elon bought it. CosmicBounceRecords.com, obviously. And yeah, man, like, hit up any artist that I'm working with. If you want to do a collab with them, if you want to feature with them, if you like their sound and think that we could do something together, don't be afraid to hit me up or Smoove or anyone that you see on my stories, because I'm not just posting them to show off. I'm posting them so you can collab with them. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So,
share the love,
hit them
absolutely.
up, man. It's cool.
Yeah, man.
It's like, you know, we can all benefit from things that we don't have at the moment. You know what I mean? So, yeah, man. Absolutely. And thanks for having me on, dude.
Thank you, mate. And thank you to everyone that's been watching this far. Much appreciated. What helps us is if you can share it around, have a chat with someone, tell them about the podcast, whether that's in person or in a DM or on your stories or anything like that. That just gets the word out. And as always, follow and subscribe. You hear these words all the time, but what it does is it keeps you up to date with any new episode that we are going to put out there. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're everywhere. So stay up to date, and we will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast. Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.